So first of all, I would like to ask Rebecca Chandler, just recently introduced. Rebecca has a history, a long-term history in drug safety. She is a medical doctor, but she worked at the Swedish Medicines Agency. She also worked at the Uppsala Monitoring Center. And I have the pleasure to work with her through the SPEAK project already a couple of years, because currently she is working at the Coalition of Epidemic Preparedness and Innovation, where she really tries to give all her passion to safety and having harmonized safety monitoring. Rebecca, welcome. If you want to stand here.
I think I want to stand there.
Okay, good.
Just because I think CEPI is maybe a new, so I hope my slides are here. Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I'm enjoying myself intensively already, and I think that for opening the morning, the pre-lunch session set the bar very high. So please know I have a certain, my heart rate is a little higher, I think, than it may have been earlier if we had been first. But I want to tell you all a little bit about CEPI. And what we're doing in the space of vaccine safety and pharmacovigilance, because I don't know how many of you know so much about CEPI. It's a relatively young organization. So I want to share with you what we've been doing over the past 5 to 4 years, and maybe think about, and hopefully in the discussion, think about actually how we can partner with VAC4EU to think about moving us on into the future. So, next slide, please. So the Coalition of Preparedness Innovations was created in 2017, really in response to the West African Ebola epidemic. And from that grew a consensus that we needed a coordinated and international plan to both develop and deploy vaccines in response to public health emergencies. And so CEPI was actually launched in Davos by the governments of Norway and India, along with the funding organizations of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Wellcome Trust, as well as the World Economic Forum. And the mission of CEPI is to accelerate the development of vaccines and other biologic countermeasures against epidemic and pandemic threats so that they can be accessible to all. And in its initial strategy, what we call CEPI 1.0, it was largely driven by investments in early clinical development for vaccines against the WHO priority pathogen list. And the plan was to invest in development through phase 2 and stockpile. Next section, next slide. So, but very early on in the lifespan of CEPI happened the COVID-19 pandemic. And actually, CEPI got involved in response to the COVID pandemic in ways that were not necessarily aligned with CEPI 1.0. They found themselves increasingly involved in later stage clinical development, filling of knowledge gaps related to the vaccines that were in use. So those experiences and thinking about responses to the COVID pandemic really informed the thinking of what we call CEPI 2.0, so our second funding cycle. And so those experiences fed into the strategic goals that were outlined for CEPI 2.0, which was to be between 2022 and 2026. So here you can perhaps see that we're coming to our final year of our second funding cycle. But originating during the planning of CEPI 2.0 now a number of years ago was really the concept of a 100 days mission. And perhaps you've heard that because it's been accepted by both the G7 and the G20. And the idea is to be able to make a vaccine available for response to a new pathogen with pandemic potential within 100 days. Next slide. So the world witnessed and dramatically benefited from the game-changing COVID-19 vaccine response. And really thanks to a lot of preparedness, research on other coronaviruses, as well as innovative scientific technologies, CEPI and others were able to advance trials of multiple COVID-19 vaccines at record speed. And as you know, traditional clinical development timelines were compressed from well over 5 years, I've even heard up to 12 years, down to about 350 days. And so it was really looking at the shortest time intervals for each of the different phases of clinical development that were reached by some of the COVID-19 vaccine developers, that the concept of a 100 days mission was born. And we accept that being able to respond in 100 days requires a significant paradigm shift in the way that we think about clinical development and also how we think about public health response. Next slide. So this paradigm shift really focuses on two areas. Preparedness, so spending a lot of effort during peacetime to build up networks and build up a coalition of partners that can help us prepare, but also using outbreaks and public health emergencies as they happen as a time to generate evidence, regulatory grade evidence that may support eventual licensure of vaccines. So really breaking a firewall between evidence generation for the purposes of regulatory approval during public health responses. So next slide. So what does vaccine safety and pharmacovigilance look like in a 100 days mission? So that was essentially the task that I was given when I joined CEPI now 4 years ago at the beginning of the CEPI 2.0 funding cycle. Just as a side note, CEPI did recognize very early from its original inception that vaccine safety had a very important component. And they actually partnered with the Brighton collaboration in the SPEAK project in 2019, so before my arrival. But again, lessons learned from the COVID pandemic, moving from simple investment in early clinical development for priority pathogens and really learning from the pandemic experience, they wanted a much broader and comprehensive idea of what vaccine safety and pharmacovigilance means in a 100 days mission. So me and my partner, there's work with a man called Alexander Precioso, who has previously worked at Instituto Butantan in industry, on the industry side in pharmacovigilance from Brazil. The two of us have worked over the last 4 years to build a coalition for vaccine safety and pharmacovigilance. And we started with our mission, which is to ensure the generation of robust evidence enabling timely benefit risk assessment of vaccines in the acceleration of both their development and deployment against epidemic and pandemic threats. So next slide. So what will it take to achieve what we think is safety and pharmacovigilance in 100 days? So we actually built a strategy that has 5 pillars. And so I'll go through them quickly. So creating a library of standardized safety endpoint definitions for our both CEPI priority pathogens, but also vaccine platforms that we are continuing our investments in. Number 2, establishing approaches and networks for robust safety evidence generation, specifically in LMIC, lower and middle income country settings. Number 3, investigation into biomarkers of reactogenicity and actually elucidating mechanisms and risk factors for known serious AESI. I make a special call out to VITT, TTS, and myocarditis. The reason for that being is because we continue to believe in the excellent record that both the adenoviral platform and the mRNA platform served us during COVID. So we continue development in those vaccine platforms, so to say. So we've made a commitment to really trying to understand more closely the mechanisms and risk factors for those 2 safety signals that were identified during COVID-19. Number 4, we want to integrate pharmacovigilance and risk management into the global manufacture of vaccines, again, particularly in LMIC. And number 5, accelerating processes and improving coordination in response to AESIX. So at CEPI, we talk a lot about disease X, the unanticipated pathogen that may cause a global pandemic. So we translated this into the AESIX, which I actually think is probably a bit more common than disease X, as we heard earlier, the unexpected, as Peter mentioned, with both narcolepsy and VITT. Next slide. So at CEPI, the concept is we're a funder. We don't do anything ourselves, so we build a coalition of partners. So CEPI is all about building partnerships with organizations, whether they be vaccine developers, whether they be labs, whether they be academic institutions, to help us achieve this 100 days mission. And here is just a map that I created quite a bit of time ago, which kind of overlays all the partners in our Coalition for Vaccine Safety and Pharmacovigilance, along with giving you an idea where our pandemic pathogens that we're very concerned about tend to have epidemics in those regions. Next slide. So hopefully you can see that I've given an icon to each of these pillars, and in the interest of time, I won't go into too much detail, but I want to tell you a bit about the members of our Safety and Pharmacovigilance Coalition. Several of them have actually already been mentioned today, so they'll be very familiar. But as I mentioned, of course, for our standardized case definitions, of course, we work with the Brighton collaboration in the SPEAK project. I think it's worth noting, everyone knows that the bread and butter of the Brighton collaboration are case definitions for safety outcomes. But in their project with CEPI, they've actually really expanded the scope of the support that they provide with the creation of companion guides to assist with the implementation of case definitions. They've also worked on a standardized template for benefit risk assessment for vaccines. And they've also helped us to do some training to build up the capacity and availability of researchers in lower and middle income countries to serve on data safety monitoring boards in their countries for clinical trials we're sponsoring in their countries. So next slide. Number 2, so this is the networks for evidence generation, largely in LMIC. So we have 2 projects in this space. The first is the BRAVE project. This is our partnership with the Global Vaccine Data Network. And it's really we're working with a number of sites in a number of countries, and I feel so bad I haven't updated this slide. Please know Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, Rwanda, and also most recently, we've added the Democratic Republic of Congo. We have partners there. And what we're going to do is we funded them over the upcoming 3 years to generate background incidence rates of AESIs that would be relevant for vaccines that were likely to be used in their context. So for Lassa fever, for Rift Valley fever, and the like. I'm incredibly excited about this project because background incidence rates and understanding of these safety outcomes, particularly in Africa, has been just absent. So we're really going to fill a need here for a number of stakeholders in the vaccine safety ecosystem. Next slide. Also a network. This is a very recent partnership that we just announced. We also have sites of clinical epidemiology sites that are actually located in countries in alignment with these vaccine manufacturers in the DCVMN, the Developing Country Vaccine Manufacturing Network. So these are sites in which we will build capacity to perform active safety surveillance studies that they actually platforms that they might use to do studies for the vaccines for which they are responsible. They will be the marketing authorization holder. Next slide. Third, again, this is the biomarkers and understanding the genomics and potentially multi-omics of these adverse events of special interest. It was mentioned earlier today, the INSIS project, and I think I've given you enough information about that, but just to know, I think CEPI will be responsible for funding really the building the infrastructure for this network and this first study looking at myocarditis and TTS. And our hope is that we really can move into looking at other adverse events of special interest and that this network could be at the ready in case we have another global pandemic and another unanticipated safety concern, or even one that's anticipated that we actually don't really understand the risk factors and the like for. Really harnessing this situation of a global pandemic that we will have been able to pool enough data on these rare outcomes to actually do such a study. Next slide. And then the fourth was building up pharmacovigilance and risk management capacity in manufacturers. This is just a nice paper that was actually authored by my partner that I mentioned earlier with his work at the DCVMN, which was really a landscaping. This was done just prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, mapping a lot of the capacities in pharmacovigilance in these DCVMN members. And unfortunately, there's not been a lot of strong legislation in lower and middle income countries for the practice of pharmacovigilance. Therefore, in some of these partners, pharmacovigilance as an industry discipline, so to say, is weak. So we're working with IQVIA and path, actually, to build up capacity for pharmacovigilance in these industry partners. So understanding the gaps that they may have, being able to provide them a library of standard operating procedures for pharmacovigilance requirements, that sort of thing. And then the final slide is actually the strengthening global vaccine safety surveillance systems and rapid responses to AESIX. So this is a little bit more my personal wish. I mean, from my experience, as I mentioned earlier, from the beginnings with narcolepsy, but how can we make our systems more robust to the rapid identification of the unknown? How can we use real-world data sources with a time lag to rapidly respond? We need a case definition, for example. So how can we put this all together to do this? Can we respond to AESIX in 100 days, might be the way I'd put it. CEPI is looking to try to respond to disease X in 100 days. So I've been working with all of our partners. I think all of our partners in our coalition play a role here, and this is kind of the task or the challenge to put before them. Thank you.